If I was just going to tell you about the record I've had the longest and most important relationship with, I'd talk about Bad Brains' RAR Sessions tape, because I can chart my own growth as a listener according to that, and it never fails to give back exponential returns. Not like a pencil line drawn in the cupboard as a kid grows up, but like a lifelong picture coming slowly into focus. And those Bad Brains songs, on one level when I was 14, I heard him, and at 15, I understood him. 25, I understood him differently, loved them even more, and again at 35 and 45, I heard them differently. There's more and more complexity and nuance to hear each time I listen. And I remember when I was 15 and dropped the needle on Helmet's Strap It On for the first time, and when I was 14 in a friend's paneled basement with blacklight posters, and his older brother, who looked like Booger from Revenge of the Nerds in an army jacket, put on Black Dog by Led Zeppelin. Both those times I was certain that the record itself was warped or damaged because the grinding time signatures couldn't possibly be performed like that. And those moments expanded my sense of the possible. But it's Bauhaus, The Sky's Gone Out, that taught me how to hear music, and taught me that it was intentionally constructed, and that expansive imagination meant more than dexterity. Very much a thrown in the deep end and teaching yourself to swim kind of moment. To be clear, there was zero goth element to this scenario. It was a sunny afternoon in a suburban bedroom, 1986. I put it on my turntable, and instead of walking a couple steps to my bed to listen like I usually did, I remember just standing there at the turntable for the duration of the record, stunned. I'm a 12-year-old suburban boy into thrash and punk, and crossover was like a very real issue to me. You know, like, why couldn't the punks and metalheads just get along? And I wasn't allowed by either my parents or my Catholic school to adopt a metal or punk tribal uniform. So I'm just a dopey, hardly pubescent kid in a suburban bedroom in an Anthrax t-shirt and Hawaiian shorts, listening to this Bauhaus album in full, staring at the cover and reading along to the lyrics. And their portraits, I was terrified of these guys, but also I felt like I'd really finally found my tribe. These were going to be my friends when I grew up. This was who I was going to be. To be clear, I was a weird kid. My mom taught at the Catholic school I went to, and 84-85, when the school sold off their Apple IIe computers cheap to the teachers, my mom brought one home. I couldn't imagine what one might do with a computer, but it had this program Print Shop, with which one could print dot matrix clip art signs on spools of paper with teeth along their edges. And for whatever reason, the first thing I thought to do with this computer was I printed out in all caps in a big banner that said "Revolution" and hung it like a streamer from one wall to the other. My parents made fun of it, like, what the fuck do you think you know about revolution? But in those years, I'd gotten pretty used to tearing down posters from my wall. Frankenchrist Penis Landscape, Pussy Galore's Dial M for Motherfucker. So, obviously, I was a kid predisposed to weirdness. And until I got a work permit at 13 to corral carts at Dominic's, my parents would give me $5 a week to mow the lawn for $2.98 and a blank tape. I'd bring the record home and tape it. The next week, I'd most often sell the record back for $1, and then I'd have $6 to spend on a new used record and a new blank tape. These new neighbors moved in down the street, and they were also into punk. And their parents gave them $20 every time they left the house, and it blew my mind every single time. But it worked out great for me, because I'd walk over to the record store with them all the time, and that's how I got to hear all the great original punk bands. Eventually, Bauhaus was the only band with a cool logo that we didn't know what it was, but they weren't interested because the logo wasn't gory or silly enough, so I bought it, expecting it to be punk, but knowing from the cover art and the logo that it was somehow more serious. At the risk of sounding like a Depression-era grandpa lecturing about appreciating what little he had, when I got a new used record each week, I did nothing except listen to that one album for a week until I'd sell it back to invest in the next one. So I thought of music in terms of albums. I always did. When I was 3 years old and obsessed with my two Kiss records, I listened to them over and over and over every day, and every song was a greatest hit. So I didn't know Bauhaus's actual greatest hits at all. Proof in point, The reunion show in '98, I would have written the set list 85% differently, and it was still the greatest night of my life. I went to the Riviera alone because it never even occurred to me to ask anyone else if they'd want to go to Bauhaus, because Bauhaus was not a thing people were into in '98. Though I do remember I ran into Doug McCombs and Tim Rutilli, who were both also there alone. They opened with Double Dare, that bass line, the stage pitch black, then just that bass line like the San Andreas Fault, then a screen lowering in the front of the stage, and Peter Murphy in black and white, framed as close as John Cale on the cover of Fear, and his eyes were closed until those first lines. I dare you to be real. I got the Bauhaus BBC Sessions CD for Christmas when I was 15 or 16. But in those intervening years, The Sky's Gone Out was all I knew about them. It was high art to me. That record was my deep and special personal secret thing that was mine alone. It promised me a whole world of possibilities beyond what I knew. It was the first time I'd become aware of Eno, and the first time I'd hear anything resembling dub. Swing the Heartache probably counts as the first industrial music I ever heard. And In the Night was the first bad disco I ever heard, and the first disco I ever liked. I mean, I clearly remember being a toddler in the corner at a disco party and thinking it was the coolest thing I'd ever witnessed because it was just like Saturday Night Fever. But this was the first disco ever made for me. Like everything else on the record, I recognized it, but it was also wrong. This was the first time that the broken syntax of lyrics would shatter open my imagination. And most significantly, it was the first time I'd become aware of an album as not just a sequence of songs, but as a collage. Like when I eventually got into The Wall a year or two later, it reminded me of The Sky's Gone Out. So, the experience of actually hearing The Sky's Gone Out for the first time, to be clear, I understand this might seem far-fetched or revisionist that I remember it so clearly, but how immense an impact this album had on me, it does seem far-fetched that one album could affect the course of someone's life so profoundly, but that's exactly why I'm telling you about it. First of all, the album is the ultimate example of the power of how concept comes to life in action. I can say it's a perfect example of modernism, how each of the components, all common, bass, guitar, drums, vocals, same as any band. They're all given their own space to be expressive, which is rare enough for a rock band lineup. But furthermore, their construction is awkwardly apparent, Brechtian. And that resonance, the seams of its construction, laid bare and plain on display, gives each song another power. There's the power of each element on its own to make the song, but there's also the added power of their assembly, like how they all come together. And this is another different expressive element, greater than the sum of its parts. And I'm not talking about like pet sounds. That's lots of layers all coming together to make one sound. That's different. And it's definitely not like Bauhaus's punk or pop contemporaries, in which all the elements work together to make a unified sound. For Bauhaus, each detail pops. Each is given space to be expressive in itself, and it's all happening simultaneously. But importantly, it's always, always primitive. No one's ever crowding each other with virtuosity. And that effect is brutal. And I say all this, and it comes across as theory, right? Kind of mumbo-jumbo. But the theory comes to life in practice and has an emotional impact. And that's why it matters. Bauhaus are a band like Kiss or the Beatles, where each member has a related but unique persona. Like the band, for example, you can just be like, I don't know, 4 or 5 guys in flannels with beards. And sure, you could say Bauhaus, 4 guys in black, and there are a million bands you could say 4 guys in flannels with beards or 4 guys in black. But what makes Bauhaus so unique is that each member's role, each element, is totally unique. And beyond what I already said about how the ways in which they all come together is totally unique, also the ways that they contradict what they usually do in their usual roles, for example, the entirety of side 2 of this album, expands and recontextualizes what they are. It's not just like Guns N' Roses doing Patience to show how tender they are. It's more like in an alternative moment or seen from another perspective, Bauhaus has as much in common with a World War I avant-garde theater company as they do with their punk and new wave contemporaries. Overall, side 1 is songs and side 2 collage. Oh, did I pause here? Wow. Overall, side 1 is songs and side 2 collage. It's perfect. The 5 songs on side 1 each stand on their own. The listener can keep each song in their heads as its own thing. And then side 2 is a single continuous piece. The album opens with a cover of Eno's Third Uncle. Eno was somehow a mysterious figure I'd only heard of, and knew was somehow powerful but couldn't comprehend, which, as adults, is exactly what we all love about him. His expansiveness makes him human, as Whitman would say. I remember recognizing at the time what a contrast this song was from the rest of the record, and knowing that it was an uncommon choice to start a record with a cover, but I also remember understanding how necessary this song was to set the tone for everything that comes after it. What I understand now that I couldn't at the time was that starting the record with an upbeat cover gets the record kick-started, but it also allows them to not break character. Like how Peter Criss needed to sing Beth because the song wouldn't work with the persona of either the star child lover or the demon or whatever. By starting the album with this cover, Bauhaus acknowledges, okay, yes, we think this song is cool, and it's the appropriate kickoff to the whole collage that follows, but also, our own songs are so true to who we are, we personally cannot write a song like this. We can appreciate fun, but we don't have it in us to create it. And I remember how the overdub snare rolls in that song sounded like, reminded me of like a Brazilian carnival to me, which I would have only known from like racist James Bond films at the time. And now it's such a minor flourish. It seems crazy that I even made that connection. But I do know that 2000 to 2003, I was obsessed with making music that sounded like having a bad trip at a party or like at Carnival. And I was chopping and screwing Orfeo Negro all the time. It was this song that I was trying to do that. And I clearly remember how much I immediately hated Peter Murphy's voice. It reminded me of Neil Diamond. And I was used to DRI and the Subhumans. I couldn't stand Bruce Dickinson or Rob Halford. I thought they were so showboaty. So Peter Murphy just made me gag. But the lyrics, and I didn't know before this record that lyrics could draw me to a record so much. The images were so powerful and imagistic. They were unlike anything I'd heard before. He never said, oh, I feel this way, or oh, I feel this way. He just showed us the images, like T.S. Eliot's concept of objective correlative, again modernism, and again concept that I didn't yet comprehend, but I could feel the effects of. The lyrics made no sense logically, but the feeling with which he sang them gave them all meanings deeper than logic. And Peter Murphy was virtuosic, but none of it was ever about demonstrating his virtuosity. His grunt at the end of In the Night, after the music ends, signaled to me as a kid that though he seemed to be the most immediately recognizable virtuoso, he too was just pushing hard, and it was primal. Speaking of that song, that weird cascadey, pitch-shifty vocal break in the middle, I ripped that off before I ever ripped anything else off. The vocal break in the Captain Jazz song In the Clear, no one might have ever made the connection because we pulled it off only to the limitations of our own technical abilities, but that's where that came from. And however much his vocal style turned me off, take the lyrics of Swing the Heartache as an example of what resonated so profoundly to me as a kid. In just a few lines, he moves from the images of lipstick on whipped cream, the paradox of maybe if it would have been uglier, it would have been easier, a run of quick inner-line rhymes, and then the self-awareness of singing about being a better singer. And all this lyrical breadth then punctuated with wordless groans that follow these synths that have been harmonizing beyond the expected key the whole time. His groans pulling the synths into the key of the song, resolving the tension they've been building the whole time until then. When I was 15, I pulled my back out the night before one of the first shows I ever played, impersonating Peter Murphy after his show at the Riviera the night before. It was the Deep Tour. So you can picture the yoga arms high up behind his back. Kept me on a hot pad as a 15-year-old. But back to the self-awareness of the singer. I hated the song Spirit. But I never skipped it, I guess, because it was just part of the journey and every song was a greatest hit. Spirit was my earliest experience understanding the persona of a singer. He complains about the puppet strings and then the cynical and manic outro chant, "We love our audience, we love our audience." It made them so much cooler than every other band because they didn't even want to be a band. But being a band was somehow irrepressible instinct to them. Truly glamorous stars knew this. They longed for the anonymity of averageness, but their vision is just too great to squelch, so they were just born exceptional. David J's bass playing is the dominant sound of the band. His bookish persona, that's a thing, like U2 or Led Zeppelin or REM. The bass player is the smart one, Kiss being the obvious exception. This is true of so many great bands. Imagine the Smiths or the Who with just adequate bass playing. They'd be nothing. But David J was truly not only the anchor of these songs, but often the only structural force. The distorted bass and silent hedges, to me when I was a kid, that was a dead giveaway that these guys were actually all super virtuosic and purposely choosing expressive brutality. And knowing that it was all an expressive, intentional choice, increased its power. That fuzzy bass line was simultaneously the smoothest and gnarliest thing I'd ever heard, striking perfect, seemingly impossible balance. Daniel Ash, for 20 years I wondered if he was an incredible guitarist or actually couldn't play. That's an amazing curiosity to inspire someone to keep them engaged for decades. Before I was old enough and sophisticated enough to realize, duh, of course that's amazing. It was so over my head for so long. I wondered, maybe I even loved Bauhaus so much despite the guitar playing. His guitar lines are so often linear, like how string sections accompany the shape of a song more than structure it. And that contradicted everything I knew how to hear before Bauhaus. I could hardly even recognize it as guitar playing. This record must have been the first feedback and noise solos I ever heard. In the night, the wildness so raw and sloppy, so much space and the tone so shrill, the gnarliest two-note riff in history. Both notes barely off, every hit barely out of time. The sheer physicality, how you could hear him digging into his guitar. Swing the Heartache. Those stingers that slide into palm mutes in the break. Super mechanical, but then changing notes at the end. And the drumming, so unlike any other drummer. Make Believe, stripped native as hi-hat, 100% inspired by Kevin Haskins' drumming. Not exactly that Kevin Haskins didn't have a hi-hat, but that was our way of tricking Nate into playing more like him. The only other record I know of that has similar rhythmic thing happening, was also very conscious make-believe rhythmic influence, was Leonard Cohen, New Skin for the Old Ceremony. The caveman drumming thing is so important. It allows so much space for the other elements. Poor Theo, the whole decade Joan of Arc wrote songs together in a room. Me and Bob were always pushing him to reduce everything down to this caveman thump. Always made me wonder if Kevin Haskins thought to play that way, or if the other guys are always bugging him to play less. But his no-wave groove still inspires most drums I program. 3 new Good Fuck songs from the last few days don't sound unlike Good Fuck, but also all 3 rhythmically could very easily fit on side 1 of this record. Which brings us to side 2, in which they no longer sound like the rock band on side 1. There were production flourishes on side 1 to confirm that all the chaos was intentional, but they always sounded like a rock band, maybe the most unique rock band of all time, but the essential elements are identifiable. Side 2, the rock band is gone, and production takes the spotlight. Basically, entirely different instrumentation than side 1, acoustic and synths. There's one song in 3 parts, then a song that stands alone but is in a similar sonic vocabulary as the first 3, then a standalone collage, which works like a miniature model of how the whole side works, weaving together the same elements in different combinations. The 3 Shadows Part 1 is all atmosphere, Peter Murphy's open-throated monastic groans, and I remember knowing that open guitar notes were not sufficiently skilled enough to be the foundation of a song. So in this way, maybe the album also first introduced me to the first inklings towards minimalism and drone. Part 2 is a true dirge. He sings "Oh Classic Gentleman." No record I'd ever heard before addressed classic gentlemen talking to them about their fish, and how he mispronounces Oedipus Rex. And again, the feeling Peter Murphy puts into every single word, the circular logic of asserting his existence. I will always exist because I always exist. Slicing the rosy cheeks of a fresh pink baby. And finally, that last spoken lyric at the end, after the music ends, makes the whole thing about something more than the song itself. Like the song can barely contain it. Part 3, the tempo accelerates. The singing louder and higher. The same objects appear in the lyrics, but they're each expanded and inverted. Sorry. Ugh. Singing about fish swimming in piss. If you think of the record like a 3-act play, Act 2 ends with this line at the end of the song: "Do you still feel thirsty now?" Which all sets the scene for the quiet centerpiece of the album. All we ever wanted was everything. The noisy guitar of side 1 is now totally gone, replaced with an acoustic strum, 2 chords. Peter Murphy sighs at the beginning and hums off key. This song was the most serious thing I'd ever experienced when I was a kid. The way he resolves everything he's built up to with that one word, factory town. No explanation, no grammar, just the one word, factory town, was the most serious thing external to myself that I'd ever confronted. Then the wide open way he sings, "Oh," between verses of "eat jelly bars and sandwich bars and barbed wire." The reverse snare that will be so prominent in the final Exquisite Corpse makes its entrance. And the outro, "Oh, to be the cream." Seriously, I know I'm known to be like the emo guy or whatever, but as an adult, I cry maybe once every 5 years. But this line, when he gets there, if I've listened to the whole album continuously and get to that line, I will likely cry. And after that emotional peak, the finale, I've spent more time trying to figure out the structure of this song, Exquisite Corpse, than any other puzzle in my life. I know, of course, it's called Exquisite Corpse, but it's incomprehensible to me how perfectly it's crafted. Remember, this is right after the emotional peak, "Oh, to be the cream." It's immediately followed by the a cappella, "Life is but a dream." And the dropping of that simple phrase we've all heard a zillion times, and the music comes in around the vocal loop, and then this is the moment that truly rewired all the circuits in my brain. The setup is so masterful. Again, another a cappella line, the incredible assertion, "I make the air fall apart." then singing about appearance, hearkening back to spirit. There's coughs and snores in the transitions, always the elements return in different combinations. That other voice comes in. I always imagined it's David J., but I don't think I have any reason to know that. It enters as everything builds, telling a story about a soldier in that British voice, until finally the screams, the sky's gone out, the sky's gone out. Then the wordless scream over the carnival dub music. Probably once every record I've ever made, I've tried to copy that specific scream. And it all comes together with that outro, the backwards tape, the howl of something, maybe a saxophone, and the return of the sky's gone out scream. The long move toward one finger piano line resolving. Then that sample after the long, long silence. My baby. I wonder what the future holds. It's so earnest and simple and perfect after, this barrage of concepts. So anyways, it's the best. I highly recommend the life-changing experience of this album, beginning to end on headphones, for you.